Welcome, government students of all ages, to this lesson on the foundations of the founders. We're going to talk about two really important guys. We're going to talk about John Locke and Baron de Montesquieu. These were two particularly important folks that our founders really looked to help them design what we now know as United States government. Before I get into the specifics about those two fellows, I want to let you know what areas of government this lesson is going to focus on. Before you see a list of key ideas in U.S. government. You could think of them as actually units. And Locke and Montesquieu are gonna influence basic concepts in American government and foundations of U.S. government. And in subsequent Know Me lessons, I will talk about these other big key ideas. So without further ado, here we go. We're going to talk about three really important concepts throughout the course of this lesson. We're going to talk about natural rights, which John Locke came up with, social contract theory, which involved John Locke as well, and then separation of powers, which was actually a gift from Montesquieu. Now, you see around these ideas, you see a couple of quotes. The first one is over here: rights are not gifts from government, and I want you to keep that idea in mind. We don't get rights from government. We get rights because we exist. And that's what this quote over here says on the right-hand side. No government, constitution, or law gives you any rights. Breathing does. All right, and this was a major revolutionary concept at the time. Prior to United States government, rights came from the king or the leader or some other government concept. We didn't have them simply because we were human, simply because we exist. And I really like this quote here down at the bottom. My natural rights are not a privilege. They cannot be granted to me by a person or any group. They are mine without anyone's consent. And this is the quintessential underlying concept of American government. We have rights because we exist. And this is something I really want you to keep in mind as we go forward. Now we're going to spend a few seconds talking about John Locke specifically and what exactly he said about natural rights and why he was so influential to the founders of the United States government. So I want to draw your attention to the fact that he was English. He was from England, so he shared a common cultural bond with members or citizens of the colonies. In his work, Two Treatises on Government, which was released in 1689, he posited several ideas that our founders really latched onto. So I want to share those with you right now. I'm going to expand this a little bit. We're going to focus in on this quote, all right? Or not this quote, but these key ideas of John Locke. Every human has three natural rights. Now here he says man, and as we've evolved as a people, we've expanded this to not just be man as in a male, but man as in humanity, all right? And there are three natural rights that everybody has: life, liberty, and property. That's just natural to all of us. Because we breathe, because we exist, because we are human beings on this earth, we have these three natural rights. Government can't give these to us, and it also cannot take those away. Government's sole purpose is to preserve natural rights only. No more, no less. That's it. Preserve natural rights. So the saying, your rights stop where mine begin, really symbolizes and summarizes that idea, that if someone is interfering with your right to life, the government will step in and stop that person from doing it. But as long as what that person is doing does not interfere directly with your ability to live your life, government needs to stay out of it. And so you see already this concept of limited government developing even with John Locke. Now, in order for this to work, people need to give up some of their rights for the sake of keeping society somewhat orderly. So there's this thing called the state of nature where there's no laws and there's no government. That's what humanity was in before we had any kind of government. You know, think like caveman type stuff, you know. So let's say I have a farm, right? And you're like, I don't know, a couple miles away, and I see your farm, and I'm like, you know what? I want that farm. That's a nice farm. There's some nice cows there. I can get some milk, you know, and there's some pigs. And who doesn't like bacon? You know, everybody loves bacon. So I'm going to go. I'm just going to kill you, and I'm going to take your farm, right? And there's no one there to stop me because there's no government. And if I'm stronger than you are, then I'll just kill you and I'll take your farm, right? But you know what? There's a guy, you know, right down the street who's like, you know what? that Jen Blank, I don't know about her. You know, she just went and took over that other person's farm, and you know what? I think I better take her out first before she comes after mine. And if he's stronger than me, then he kills me. And not only does he have my farm, he has your farm, because I already killed you and took it, right? So now this guy, this random guy that we didn't know about, he has 3 farms. So that's the state of nature. You know, nobody's protected. You can literally do whatever you want. And human beings at a certain point were like, you know, this isn't really working out for us. You know, there's got to be a better way to do these things. And this better way is called the social contract. And we agree to live in a society together where I give up my freedom to kill you and take your farm. But in exchange, that other guy down the street, he can't kill me and take mine. So that's a pretty good trade-off, you know. Now, if government, though, starts acting snarky and they start not doing what they're supposed to do and they go beyond their limits, we also have the right to kick the bums out, get rid of them. We rebel, and we overthrow the government and establish new government that better suits us, right? And so this is the basic concept of what Locke is talking about. And he also argues that a republic is the best form of government. Not a democracy, a republic. Now, in a different lesson, I talk about the key differences between those two things, and they are different. It's very important to note the United States is not a democracy. Matter of fact, if you look at what the founders wrote, if you really understand what they believed, they thought democracy was, to be quite frank, kind of stupid. You know, it's not, at least the key founding fathers, James Madison, he's like, listen, democracy is not going to work. Republic, representative government, is the best form, and that's how we should operate. Let me kind of move this graphic over a little bit and show you some cool quotes from John Locke. So, in the first quote, all mankind being equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possession. So if we're all equally able to go after our dreams and live our lives and determine our own destinies, then there should be no reason for us to go and try to mess with somebody else. And then the next quote, political power is that power which every man has given up into the hands of society. We have allowed some borrowing to happen. Our elected officials borrow our power, the power of the people, and we take it back whenever we feel like it. That's what elections are all about. So if they mess up, then we say vote the bums out and we put somebody else in there. And that's how United States government works. Now, another really, really important guy was Montesquieu. Now, he's an interesting character. He's actually from France, all right? So he's a Frenchman, which, you know, the English and the French, they don't always get along too well. But, you know, the United States, we don't discriminate, right? Where if you got a good idea, we're going to use it, you know, and that's what makes us very creative and very adaptable in this crazy world that we're living in. So he's from France, and he wrote this document called The Spirit of the Laws, and that was published in 1748. And what I want to do is expand this graphic a little more and focus in on really what the key ideas of that document were, all right? And you can see some similarities here to our government. So government must have separation of powers. You should have 3 branches, an executive, a legislative, and a judicial. The executive executes the laws, the legislative makes the laws, and the judiciary judges the laws. And you need all 3 of these doing those 3 jobs in order to ensure freedom and liberty. When you have separation of powers, you have the ability to have checks and balances. So each branch checks the power of the other, so we don't have a concentration of power. Concentration of power is very, very bad. It's a bad thing. You've heard the phrase, I hope, absolute power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the idea of checks and balances is to keep absolute power from actually developing. So now let's move over to the other side of this quote. There's some cool, or the other side of this graphic, there are some really good quotes here. And Montesquieu says, when the legislature and executive are united in the same person, there can be no liberty. When you have a king who is control of making the laws and executing the laws, there's no check on the power. There's no way to stop it from consolidating in one entity or one person, and that allows corruption to take place. That allows that entity to take your freedom because they feel like it, because they can. And this other really, really excellent quote that Madison really loved is, power should be a check to power. That's how we balance the system of government that we have, and it really is an amazingly unique system. So what did we learn? Well, we learned about three key things. We learned about the separation of powers, social contract theory, and natural rights. So separation of powers, which is what we just discussed, government power must be checked through separate branches, because you can't trust government to maintain freedom if power is concentrated. So in order to do that, you have to separate, and you have to have executive, legislative, and judicial branches. And then in the reason why we have government is to protect natural rights. Government does not give us the rights. We have these rights because we exist. And those very, very important rights are life, liberty, and property. And social contract theory is the concept that we give up certain freedoms for certain security. Remember the state of nature we talked about. The state of nature didn't work out, so we had to figure out a way to have some sort of stable society so that we could grow as a species, right? But if government violates that contract that we established with them, we just boot them out. So I hope this lesson was useful for you. I hope you learned what you needed to learn, and I will see you next time.